were marginal, but there was an inner belief in the team that we could win. So we went down and had coffee and just talked about the game. And I said to Michael, I said, look, if you think you want to have a go, have a go. Anyway, so it was 32-29, we get the penalty, and I've got the radio on screaming, take the 3 points, take the 3 points, and he had a go. So it was fantastic. You know, great belief, the ultimate belief in you're prepared to win.
You mentioned great day for Japanese rugby. It was a great history. They made it. How did it feel?
Yeah, well, when we started off, you know, I started off coaching Japan 4 years before the World Cup, and the history of Japan at the World Cup was very poor. They hadn't won a game of the World Cup for 24 years, and when they had played against tier 1 countries like South Africa and New Zealand previously, they were already beaten before they went into the game. You know, they were beaten by anything up to 150 points. So when I started off with the Japan side, I wanted them to be part of something more than just playing rugby. And Japanese rugby, you know, for the older people here, will remember in the 60s and 70s, it was a major sport in Japan. You know, major play Worcester and you get 60,000 people at Kokoritsu. You know, it was a dominant sport, but it had fallen away, and one of the reasons why, because the national team was so uncompetitive. So what we said to the team, this is an opportunity for you guys to change Japanese rugby history, to make people proud of Japanese rugby again. So, you know, to beat South Africa at the World Cup made the Japanese people proud of rugby again. And the next game I think we played against Scotland, there was 30 million people in Japan watched the game on television, which is absolutely remarkable. You know, a few of you must have watched that game.
Exactly. Well, you had an offer from Japanese the rugby union on 2012, and Japan needed to be stronger. At that time, what was exactly, what do you think exactly you needed to start from to build up this team? Well, you had probably 4 years to do it.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, when you start any sort of project, first of all, you've got to understand the culture of the organisation. So every organisation has its culture. And when you're a foreigner coming in, you've got to understand what you can change and what you can't change. So one of the things I did initially was I got a friend of mine to do a thesis on the samurai culture, because I wanted to understand where the roots of Japanese people were. And so the girl did that for me, and there were 3 values that came out for me out of the samurai culture, and they were hard work, loyalty and trust. So then when I started to put the team together, I made those the 3 values that we kept on reinforcing all the time. You know, we had to be the hardest working team in the world, we had to be loyal to the Japanese national team, and we had to trust each other. And, you know, trust is always difficult, particularly when you don't speak the same language, you know, because there's always miscommunication, even though we had a very good interpreter, and you're listening to him now, so if he's making mistakes, he might be breaking my trust now, but he's a fantastic fellow. Yeah, there's always elements of mistrust there, and the players had to trust me, I had to trust the players, and the players had to trust the staff, and I think we got that. And when you get that, then you get a collective will. And if you look at Japan playing South Africa, now realistically, none of our Japanese players would get in the South African side, none of them. But the collective will of those players is much higher than the individual will of the South African team, and that's how we won the game.
You have developed Japan way to play against the top teams in the world. What did you think were the key strategies for the Japanese team to play against physically gifted teams? Like Japanese were like size differences, physical differences. What was your thinking about that?
Well, again, the Japan way was a way of making the players proud of being Japanese. So we didn't want to copy anyone else. We wanted to create our own sort of rugby. And to do that, you need courage. You know, it's difficult playing the game a different way. So we played a fast tempo game, so we had to be super fit, we had to be skillful, and we had to be smart. So we had to be able to vary our tactics, because you can't just play fast all the time, because then it becomes predictable. So we needed to be able to vary our tactics, and so we set up a practice regime that reinforced that all the time. And that was the Japan way, the way we trained, the way we played, the way we interacted as a team. It was all about doing it a Japanese way. Not copying New Zealand, not copying Australia, not copying England, but doing it our own way.
I think it was a really hard work. Famous coaching method, head start, starting from 5 a.m. The first training starts, then 10, and then afternoon you had another training set. Did you come up with this like head method, like head start method, with other like coaching team, or was this for specific Japanese team?
No, the head start was uniquely for Japan, because we had a team that was small, that wasn't particularly fit and wasn't particularly strong. I remember when I saw the players for the first time, I thought they were pop stars. They didn't look like rugby players. They were all missing so much muscle. They looked like they should have been in SMAP, not a rugby team. And I thought, goodness me, what have I got here? Pop stars, not rugby players. All that beautifully manicured hair, plucked eyebrows, nice fingernails, no muscle. I thought, well, how are we going to change this? So I sat down with our strength and conditioning coach, who was absolutely brilliant guy, and we thought, if we train the same as every other team, we're not going to make the necessary improvement in 4 years to be the best teams in the world. So therefore, how can we do it better? So there's a couple of things we did, and one of the things was to be better than the opposition, or to improve faster than the opposition, we had to get a head start. So a head start meant we trained at 5 a.m. in the morning. So the players would either do weights or skills or some fitness work that'd make them catch up to the rest of the world. And the players hated it. You know, they probably still hate me today for it, because no one likes getting up at 5 a.m. And some of the players couldn't sleep at night because they were so nervous they'd be late for training. But it was the way that in the end it gave the team the confidence, it gave them the physical preparation to be able to compete with teams like Samoa. When we played Samoa, in the back line each player was giving the opposition 9 kilograms in weight. Now if that was a boxing fight, it wouldn't be on. You wouldn't have that fight. But because our players had so much confidence in their physical preparation, they could compete with those guys and compete very successfully.
Oh, they did it. They changed the history of Japan rugby. And you were there, you were the coaching, and what did you feel about the players? Because like every year they be changing, every month they're being changing. They're preparing, their physicals getting better, the mental wise, physical wise. What do you think about the players, and what were you telling the players to do?
We tried to keep things very simple. The players had individual plans about how they had to improve. And again, in any organisation you're running, you've got to make sure that each individual knows how they're going to improve. You've got to put a plan in place, and then you've got to devote resources to it. And so we tried to improve the players individually. And you've got to treat the players as individuals. Some players need a kick up the backside, other players need arm around their shoulders, some players needed just to have a cup of tea together. So every player would work out what they needed and then tried to give it to them in terms of their reinforcement. One of the funniest stories from the World Cup is with Goromaru. And I'll tell you this story. In June, we had a practice game at Miyazaki. We'd been training really hard, and it was the last weekend of June. We basically trained the whole month without a day off. And this was a really tough game. It was like 32 degrees, 85% humidity. And Goro in that game gave up. He stopped trying. And so I took him out to dinner about 2 nights later, and he thought I was going to go criticise him. But I sat him down, I went to a nice sushi restaurant, we ate sushi together, just talked about his family. And then I asked him at the end, I said, you know, Goro, what do you think you need to do to improve? And he basically had all the points that I had and said them himself. And from that day onward, he changed as a player. And as a result, because he changed, I didn't change him, he changed. But the method I was able to use with him allowed him to change rather than being told to change. And as a result of that, he became one of our best players at the World Cup and is now, you know, he advertises everything from ramen to speaking English to I don't know what. When you turn on the television, all you see is his face. I walk into Dentsu, all I see is Goromaru's face. He's like everywhere.
Choice of the captain, how important was it? Because you changed the captain from Hirose to Michael Leach.
Yeah, so when I first took over the team, I knew I had to have a guy that was respected by all the players. And so I picked Hirose from Toshiba, very smart boy, extremely intelligent, and very, very dedicated rugby player. Not a great rugby player, but dedicated. But he did a fantastic job for the first years creating the base. Really terrific job. You know, he's a smart character. He might end up running Toshiba one day if there's still a Toshiba company in 10 years' time. There's no one from Toshiba here, is there? Only joking, only joking. But then we needed to change. We needed something new, and he was struggling to stay in the team. So Michael Leach was a New Zealand boy that came over to high school in Japan at the age of 15. Studied hard at high school, played rugby, went to Tokai University, and he actually studied, which is absolute unbelievable for a rugby player to study at university in Japan. He did, and he's doing his master's degree now at Tokai University. Speaks perfect Japanese, obviously speaks English, and is committed to Japan. So he could bring everyone together. You know, and he put his body on the line every game he played. You know, I don't think I've ever seen a player that is so committed to a cause as he was, and he will be in the future. And he was just an outstanding captain.
Do you think Leach Michael will still be the captain to pull up the team from now on too?
Well, he's got to decide what he wants to do with his rugby future. You know, at the moment, and it's with a lot of the players, they're playing top league here and then playing Super Rugby. So they're playing back-to-back seasons. And you just physically, rugby's the most violent sport in the world. So to keep playing 12 months a year is very draining. And then on top of that, then to play 10 internationals for Japan. The great thing about Japan now is because of the success they had at the World Cup, they play good quality international matches. You know, they played 2 games against Scotland. They've got great fixtures in November. So they're high quality games, and to play top league Super Rugby and then play for Japan, something's going to give. You know, and it's no coincidence that Goro's injured now, Goromaru's injured now, Leach is injured now, Marley Sal's been injured. You know, those guys, they just can't keep doing it. So he'll have to decide what he gives away, and it might have to be Super Rugby if he wants to continue playing for Japan.
So you and the staffs and the players changed the history of Japanese rugby. Now you're the head coach of England. The next head coach is going to be running the Japan national team. But what do you think are the challenges that the Japan national team has to go over for the World Cup 2019 from your point of view?
So whenever, you know, one of the things is whenever you've been successful, you get praise, and praise makes you weak. You know, criticism makes you tough, praise makes you weak. And the players now are being praised a lot. And so the environment the new coach has to set up has to inspire the players to greater heights. You know, he's got to either inspire them through the way he trains or the dream he sets for the team. You know, and it's going to be a difficult job because you watch the players, and like I watch all the rugby, and I've watched them play Super Rugby, I watched them play top league, and the players aren't working as hard as they were. And unless you work hard, and when you've had success, you've got to work even harder. And it's one of the hardest things about coaching or management of people. When you've had success, how do you then inspire people to work even harder to be more successful? So you've got to come up with new ideas, you've got to come up with new methodology, you've got to come up with new dreams to inspire them. So that's the challenge of the new coach. And they're going to have to change their rugby style, because you can't just keep playing the same way. So their base philosophy might stay the same, but then they're going to have to come up with different ways of playing the game. So it's quite a difficult challenge, but not insurmountable at all. As we showed at the World Cup, that everything's possible. Like, who ever thought Japan could beat South Africa? Who ever thought Japan could win 3 of the 4 games of the World Cup? So one of the things you've got to be careful of when you're managing people or any organisation is that you, as the leader, you don't set limitations on those people. You allow them to keep growing, and that's always a hard thing, because sometimes it's easier to set limitations. Now we've done that. You've got to keep on encouraging people to grow and grow and grow.
So what do you think about the Sun Wolves has been playing in the Super Rugby this season? What do you think? Is it really good for the Japanese rugby to be getting better? Or?
Well, it's fantastic for players to play at a higher level, but it needs to be well organised. You need to manage the playing load and the training load of the players who are playing Super Rugby and top league. So that's one of the most difficult things. But the way you get better as a player is by playing against better players, playing with better players, and playing at a higher standard all the time. Because each level of rugby you play, the thing that does change is the time and space you have. When you play at Test rugby, you have less time, you have less space. So therefore, you have to make decisions quicker. And I'm sure it's the same in business. Whenever you go up the levels, you've got to be able to make decisions quickly. You've got to be able to assemble that information and make decisions quickly. And so playing Super Rugby gives the players an opportunity to practice that on a weekly basis. And I've seen some players improve immeasurably. Like Tatakawa has improved immeasurably during the course of Super Rugby. Tamra's improving. So there are a couple of players that really benefit from playing Super Rugby.
Towards 2019, of course, there's a lot of young players who can or are wanting to join the Japan national team. And youth players in junior high school or high school, what do you want the young players to learn about or train about to be a good player going to the Japan national team towards 2019?
It was interesting hearing Chang Pak Ho talk. And the two things that stood out for me, and it resonates with rugby players in Japan as well. You've got to be hungry. He wanted to be a pro baseball player because, first of all, he was able to eat noodles, and then he saw people come to his school that played pro baseball. So he was hungry to do it. So he was hungry in both sense. And Japan's a comfortable country. It is a very comfortable country. If you're a good player at high school, then you go to a good university, you go to Keio or Worcester, you play okay for Keio or Worcester, then you get a job with Toshiba or Panasonic or Suntory. So you've got a good life, haven't you? That's a good life. So where does that hunger come from? If you're comfortable. And so the job of the coaching staff is to make those players hungry. And then the other thing is, again, you've got to have a dream. He was saying he watched those players play in front of 50,000 people. You want kids to be dreaming about playing for Japan at Yokohama Stadium in front of 60,000 people, scoring the winning try against the All Blacks. You've got to create those images and those dreams for those young players. And you do that by having good coaching of the young players. You know, coaching a young players is so important that you give them the hunger, you give them the skills, and then you give them the imagination to go where they want to go.
I think that's the good thing to manage the elevate the motivation for the players. But in words, I think it's really easy. But having them for the physical wise or mental wise, how difficult is coaching those young players?
Well, the most difficult thing is that in most sports, the reality is in most top-level sports, you've got to be comfortable at being uncomfortable, because you're doing things that are physically difficult, and you're under pressure the whole time. When I was in Sydney recently, I was speaking to the champion horse race trainer, and he was telling me how horses, race horses are 500 Ks, and you've got to teach them to be uncomfortable, because when they gallop, it hurts. When horses gallop fast, it hurts, because they've got 4 little hooves like that, and they're carrying around 500 Ks. And it's exactly the same in top-level sports. You've got to teach the young players to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So therefore, the sort of training you do has got to be more intense than a game, and that's the preparation for playing the game. So that's why, with Japan, our sessions were immeasurably harder than a game. And Michael Leach, when he came off after the South African game, he said at the end of the game, and it was the greatest compliment I ever got, he said, the end of the game was just like a training session. We knew exactly what we had to do, we were comfortable doing it. And it's the same as preparation for work. You've got to make people being comfortable being uncomfortable when the heat's on.
I have a few questions about like you're actively approaching managers of different sports, such as Glaudiola, Norio Sasaki, the manager of a Japanese women's soccer team, and Tatsunori Hara, to discuss about coaching and management in the past. What did you learn from them through the conversations, and what is getting into your coaching method right now?
I think the first thing you got to do as any leader of an organisation, you've got to create a learning environment, and to create a learning environment, you've got to be the example of that. So, knowledge is king in most endeavours you do. You've got to have great knowledge, and you've always got to be seeking out people who've got more knowledge than you have. And therefore, when I first got the job in Japan, I tried to look at who were the most successful coaches in Japanese sport, and I tried to find some time to talk to them. And what you find is that everyone basically does the same thing. It's about creating a team culture, it's about creating a vision, it's about having values within that organisation, and then making sure people do it. And some days you put soya sauce on top, some days you put tomato sauce on top, some days you put mustard on top to change it. But in fact, everyone says and does the same thing. But when you go to those great people, like Hara-san or Sasaki-san or Pep Guardiola, you find just a different approach of how they do it. And that, again, because when you're a leader and you're in front of people all the time, you've got to keep them interested. And to keep them interested, you've got to be able to say the same thing in a different way, but have the same meaning. And that's the key of people believing what you say.
Are there any other managers or sports or companies that would you like to meet, make conversations right at this moment?
Well, I just visited Roy Hodgson, who was the English soccer coach. And he was such a lovely guy, like a real gentleman. And his training sessions were excellent. But again, you've got players there who aren't motivated by doing it for the team, they're motivated by money. So to turn that around, it's very difficult. Yeah, you look at sports today. You look at the most successful teams. Yeah, they always have a guy in charge who's very clear about how he wants his team to be. Yeah, the identity of your team is so important that whenever the fans see your team play, they know what they're going to get. They know what things the team's good at. So they're the coaches you want to meet.
Mr. Hodges? Mr. Hodges, the England manager of the soccer team, Sam? Well, I'd like to hear a few words from about the England national team. First of all, congratulations for 3 straight wins at Australia. How's your feeling at this moment?
Yeah, whenever you take over a new team, the process is always the same. So England, the process I did with Japan was very much the same. Yeah, I was trying to understand culturally what I could change and what I couldn't change. And I found the English people to be very similar to the Japanese people in that, you know, in Japan it's very important to be socially cohesive, and the English are the same. You know, politeness for the English people is so important. They like to be polite to each other. They don't like to have conflict face to face. So a lot of things I've used for Japan I can use for England again. But they've got so much talent. You know, it's frightening. It is frightening how much talent they've got. You know, we've gone from 8th to the world to 2nd in the world in 6 months.
Yes.
You know, we're only touching 30% of the potential of the team. You know, they're going to be a very, very good team. So I've got a picture in my head already.
Yes.
That's Yokohama Stadium on the 11th. I think it's the 11th of November, the World Cup final. We'll be there.
Oh.
And we'll be picking up the trophy.
Oh, great. England team didn't qualify the group league at the World Cup last autumn, but you become the England team head coach. 6 Nations Grand Slam, 1 against Wales and 3 games straight against Australia. Wow, what was your thoughts and what was needed? What was your preparation to kick the team?
The 3 big things I did was just firstly got the players to understand the privilege that they have of playing for the national team, and if they weren't prepared to make sacrifices to have that privilege, they weren't going to be in the team. So I said, I'm going to be watching you to see whether you're prepared to sacrifice to earn the privilege of wearing the national team. So that was number 1. Number 2 was to get absolute clarity in the way we wanted to play. So again, we wanted to create an English style of rugby, not a Japanese style, not a New Zealand style, English style of rugby that's all based about power, strong defence. And then the third thing we did was just make it a bit of fun. So we reintroduced, you know, the players were allowed to drink beers. You know, we cut out all the treating them like schoolboys and treated them like adults and gave them choices they had to make.
So, did you have like head start program in England team? No.
No head starts in England. Like, it's still dark until 8 a.m. in the morning. So to have a head start when it's pitch black is not too attractive.
Do you think it will be? Well, of course, you didn't do it to the England team, but if you did it to the England team, do you think it will went good like Japan?
I'd probably be somewhere in the English Channel by now.
Well, actually, you changed the England national team, but being England coach, was it harder or easier than you expected? It was like 9 consecutive wins. You changed the pride.
When I look back on Japanese, coaching Japan was probably one of the most enjoyable periods I had as a coach. I absolutely loved it, and I've always, because I'm half Japanese, I've got a strong emotional connection with Japan. But when I look back now, I also, whilst it was enjoyable, it was very stressful because you're always speaking in a second language, and that makes it stressful. So going to England to coach where you're coaching in your first language is much easier.
Now England is 2nd place of the IRB ranking, and what's your next goal for the England national team?
It's about time someone beat New Zealand, and we're going to be the team that beats New Zealand. So our aim is by 2018 to be the top team in the world, go into the World Cup as #1 ranked team, and then win the trophy at Yokohama Stadium.
Yes, looking forward for this.
Maybe play Japan in the final.
Yeah, that would be much better. Yes, that would be very great. But against your old-time teammate Michael Cheika, did you have any special feelings about that at your country, Australia, with England national team head coach?
Not really. You know, when you coach a team, and I've been lucky enough to coach in a number of different countries. So I've coached Australia, I've coached South Africa, I've coached Japan, and now coaching in England. You know, I'm emotionally attached to the team I coach. I love the players I have, but then when you've done that, you move on. And I'm an Australian, and I love Australia, and I'm half Japanese, and I love Japan. But if I was coaching against Japan, I wouldn't feel any emotional attachment to beating Japan. You know, I'd want to beat them like any other team. So that was the same in Australia. But it's fun. You know, it's fun beating your own country.
We have a few minutes left. We had a question from the attendants. If not rugby, in what area of sports or other field would you like to engage yourself in?
I'd love to be a football manager.
Football manager?
I'd love to manage Manchester United. That's my dream.
Oh. Wow. And to people over here, the agents, or trying to compete or achieve success in world sports marketing area, could you give the attendants a few advice to achieve success in the world?
Yeah, I think, you know, whenever you start some sort of project, you've got to know where you want to go. So that's the most important thing. You've got to know where you want to finish. Then you work back from there. So if that's your dream, whether it be the #1 marketing business in Japan, you've got to work back to where you are now. Don't start here and then try to work out where you're going to go. You've got to know where you want to finish. Then you look at, right, if that's the #1 organisation in the world, what do I have to have? What's absolutely non-negotiable to have, that I have to have in my organisation to make it? Then you go back, you look at your structure of your organisation, you look at the staff of your organisation, you look at the methodology of how you do things. And the way you're doing it now, does that allow you to go where you need to go? And then you've got to be so insistent on making sure you're following that plan. Always reviewing what you're doing, making sure that you're always moving forward. And if people don't move forward with you, you've got to be quite severe. You can't allow to have walkers in your organisation. People who want to walk kill you. Now, it's the same in a rugby team. You know, people who don't want to give absolutely 100% to being committed to be the best, they kill you. And as a leader, you've got to identify them very quickly and get rid of them. Keep reviewing, keep moving along, and keep dreaming. And you've got to make sure everyone in your organisation understands that dream. And they want to be part of that dream.
Thank you, Mr. Eddie Jones. We would like to see you on 2019 World Cup Japan in the finals. No, maybe, of course, in Group League, but on the finals. Yes. Thank you very much for your time.
I think
Thank you very much.